Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Ninja-Ninjutsu podcast. I'm your host, Don Rowley. Today, I'm going to touch a little bit on the story of the founding of the Togakure-ryu, but this is mainly going to be about Shogun and the Shogun system and all that. Right now, of course, Shogun is a miniseries on air, and a few people have asked me if I've what I think of it, and my response is basically I'm not watching it. It's not that it's a bad story or anything like that. It's just that little historical inaccuracies drive me crazy. And I saw the original TV series back in the 80s, and I enjoyed it. I then read the novel and I enjoyed it. Then I learned Japanese history, and it's like, okay, well, and just to give you an example of problems that I have with things like this is, in my feed on Facebook, there was a picture of some of the main actors, including the guy that plays Blackthorn. He's got a couple of pistols like this, and they're flintlocks. Flintlocks. Okay, flintlocks weren't even invented at the time that Shogun went on. Okay, so things like that. It just irritates me. I mean, probably great story based on some of the people that they have cast. I'm sure great acting, but goddamn flintlocks. Okay, so yeah, but if you want to know a little bit more about the background of what's going on, this is the podcast to watch or listen to. Not many visuals things going on here. So, again, Shogun. It is a piece of fiction, but it is kind of loosely based on some facts. What is a shogun and all that, I'll have to explain. And that's what I'm here for. So, Shogun, the the miniseries is basically based in like the latter half of the 16th century. And again, 16th century means the 1500s, okay? Some people that watch this are not native speakers of English. I'm going to try and make it easy for them. English is difficult. I mean, we drive on a parkway and park in a driveway. I mean, as Gallagher pointed out, it's a pair of panties, but one bra. Just does not make any sense whatsoever, okay? But again, so latter part of the 16th century. To really understand things, we got to go back a few centuries before that to the founding of the first shogunate. Now, there was a couple families in the capital, Kyoto, at the time, that had a spat, and a lot of bodies piled up. It was a Taira and the Minamoto. Both of them were basically scions of the imperial family. Um, Basically, the emperor got taken care of, his sons got taken care of, his sons got taken care of, but at a certain point they said, okay, you're on your own. And then they were given a name like Taira or Minamoto and kicked out on their own. And these were basically the formation of what we call the samurai class. They were rich enough that they could actually devote time to practicing warfare, more specifically mounted archery. There's still you can still see examples of the ancient Japanese art of drive-by shooting, called the yabusame. It's all against a stationary target now, but back in the day, they could hit a running target on the back of a galloping horse. That takes a lot of time to develop that skill. Okay, if you ever seen the movie Ran, one of the first scenes they're hunting a wild boar on the back of a horse. That's the type of things they did, which made them very effective on the battlefield as long as they were doing skirmishes, where A and B both show up at point and they both go at it, and they didn't have to defend territory. The guy that could basically outrun everyone and outdistance everyone with his weapon had a great advantage over the PBI, poor bloody infantry. So they were basically the military elites for centuries because of that. And a lot of families came to serve the imperial court, and they were known as like military families, buke. Bu being military, K meaning family, the same K as soke, head of a family. So these two families went at it. The Minamoto originally lost, and the two sons of the instigator were sent off to, be raised by someone else instead of getting killed off. One of the last times that ever happened. But the guy, the head of the Taira clan, kind of had a soft spot, and wanted the wife of the widow of the defeated guy, and wanted to get on a good side. Well, these two guys, named Yoritomo and Yoshitsune, for the Minamoto clan, kind of came back when they were adults and, started a war in 1181. Went to 1185. And as an aside, I'm just going to point this out. Japanese names tend to be rather fluid back in the day. They're nowadays, if you're born with a name, you're going to keep it for the rest of your life most likely. But back in the day, like you had a kid's name, and then when you had the coming of age ceremony, you usually had another name, and family names would change every so often. So the Minamoto clan, there's many different, I'm going to be talking about different branches of the Minamoto clan, but, again, different names. One of them, one of the branches of the Minamoto clan during this war called the Genpei War, lived by the Kiso River near what now is Nagano. And so he was sometimes called Minamoto no Yoshinaka and sometimes Kiso no Yoshinaka. You see Kiso being the river they were nearby, and sometimes even Minamoto Kiso no Yoshinaka. And according to the founding story of the Togakure-ryu, he was defeated, I believe it was 1162, by somebody named Saito, and then his follower Daisuke Nishina had to flee to Iga and learn, ninjutsu. That's problematic. Basically, you've got to remember that, for centuries, these stories of the founding were passed down from word of mouth. Have you ever played telephone? You got that circle. By the time that story gets all the way back around to you, it's a little bit different from how it started out. So yeah, so it wasn't 1162. Kiso Yoshinaka actually was defeated during the Genpei War again. 1181 was the start of it. 1185 was the end of it. Basically because, he went into Kyoto and, defeated the Taira. They've had to flee. And then he got played by the nobles and pissed off Yoritomo, who was the head of the family and the war. So Yoritomo sent in Yoshitsune to defeat Yoshinaka. Yoshinaka, of course, got defeated. And again, that's where the story of Nishina Daisuke actually fleeing to Iga. An interesting fact on this that I'm going to, in this book, the Hambo Jitsu, that I've got a translation of right here. There's an interesting bit by a guest writer that I'm just going to read out here. Okay, so yes, okay, so that is that. Another important thing for Mr. Hatsumi is that the founder of Togakure-ryu Ninjutsu was Daisuke Nishina. Daisuke was born into the Nishina family in Shinshu, which had roots in the province of Azumino. There's a detailed description in the book Shinshu Nishina Maki, Tales of the Nishina of Shinshu, of which I have a copy. Nishina Jimyogyu in Omachi is a family shrine. The sacred area in Mount Izuna, which is famous for Izuna Shugendo and Izuna Tsukai, a form of magic, has been maintained by the Nishina family. In that noble lineage, the name Yukihiro Nishina, father Daisuke, is listed as vassal of Kiso Yoshinaka. So yeah, so here we go. Somebody, independent of the Bunjinkan, found out that, Nishina's father, Daisuke's father, actually is listed as a retainer of Kiso Yoshinaka. And again, the father and the son went off to join Kiso Yoshinaka. In the tales of the Togakure-ryu, there's no mention of what happened to dad. But, again, Daisuke eventually confirmed existence, according to the Nishina family records to this day, had to flee to Iga. And again, he started being calling, Nishina from, Daisuke from Togakure, because that's where he was from. Again, names change. And today it's, the area is called Togakushi. But again, it looks like, Daisuke fled before people started pronouncing it Togakushi instead of Togakure. I've put something on Facebook about the change in names there. Togakure does not mean hidden door. It means a door used to hide, and it's related to a myth of the Japanese deities. Sun goddess went into a cave, used the door, a rock as a door, got lured out. The door is basically in the shrine at Togakushi, what's called Togakushi now. So it's a door meant for hiding, not hidden door. So anyways, so that's Kiso Yoshinaka. He got defeated. Yoritomo eventually defeated Yoshitsune because they had a problem. And so Yoritomo of the Minamoto clan became the first shogun, permanent shogun. What it was before that, Shogun is actually a longer title, but everyone uses Shogun now. Um, they would get, this commission as Shogun to be the head of the emperor's armies, of course, and this was a big thing. If the Shogun came into an area and went to the imperial governor of an area, he could basically demand anything. He says, I need this, I need that, boom, boom, boom. My soldiers need a place to stay. I need you to give this much amount of rice to us to give, basically carte blanche. So yeah, and up until 1185, every time after a campaign, the shogun would then give back the commission and go back to being a regular one. But Yoritomo was crafty, and he managed to get it so that it was a hereditary thing. Anyone from the Minamoto clan, anyone that descended back to this imperial prince that founded the Minamoto clan, could be a shogun. Okay, and that got interesting later on. And there was essentially three different shogunates in Japan. And the Japanese word for shogunate is bakufu, which basically means like a tent city or tent headquarters, probably, yeah, tent headquarters, and kind of reflect the fact that this is supposed to be a temporary thing. This is, they're supposed to be, in the field, but again, it was made permanent. But in the Japanese name is bakufu instead of shogunate. So basically, the first shogunate survived and fought the Mongols twice, and then there was discontent, and it eventually led to another member of the Minamoto clan, this one going by the name of Ashikaga, the Ashikaga family of the Minamoto clan, overthrowing them and setting up the second shogunate. The first shogunate was set up in Kamakura, which was the Minamoto kind of like homeland. It's most famous for that giant Buddha, that that bronze Buddha outside. You've probably seen it. Um, it's an interesting place to see. Go see Kamakura if you have a chance. It's a good day trip from Tokyo area. Um, the second shogunate was set up in Kyoto because part of the problem that led to the downfall of the first shogunate was imperial intrigue. So the Ashikaga family, the Ashikaga shoguns, wanted to keep an eye on the imperial court and what they were doing. So they set it up, and again, this went on until 1467, at the start of a 10-year war that's called the Oni no Ran. Ran, again, is, I put out a book called it, but it's more like chaos because it lasted 10 years, and the big thing was, okay, whose side was this family on? Well, what period are we talking about? Because they would change sides depending on what they wanted to do. At the start of hostilities, if there was a neighbor across the way that they've been wanting to just bash for years and years, and they declare for side A, well, they would declare for side B. And if they defeated, their enemies over there, and there was another person that was also on side B, but they wanted their land, well, then they would change to side A. Rather chaotic. Again, Ran kind of means chaos, and it's used for riots a lot too. So that basically went from 1467 to 1477. Yeah, 1470, yeah, and broke the back of the shogunate because people, started to realize, the shogun only had a relatively small household, guard. Everything else was supposed to be done by his vassals. So if vassal A acted up, the idea was that, then all these other vassals would be ordered by the shogun to go and chastise him. The Onin no Ran showed that this was just all, a promissory note. This is like, there was nothing really backing it up. The shogun really didn't have the power to force anyone. And if they just thumbed their noses at him, they could, just, do what they want. As long as they maintained the facade of, following the shogun. So this basically happened, and this is the start of what the Japanese call the Age of War, the Sengoku Jidai. And toward, again, there was a shogun, but he was basically powerless. And this is where all these war movies, from Japanese samurai war movies go on, is during this period until the forming of the third and last shogunate, which is the setting for the movie, the miniseries Shogun. Get to like the latter half of the 1500s, the Portuguese make landfall in 1543, and two of the three of them have guns, and guns just took off. And that really changed the ways wars were fought in Japan. Again, you had the samurai who could basically like outdistance any, infantryman and outshoot him. But it took decades to get that good. With guns, you could take a peasant, give him 2, 3 weeks of training, and bang, just mass volleys. 100 guys with a gun against a samurai. Well, you can. And another thing that the Japanese don't really admit to, but one thing that seems to have been introduced by the Europeans is pikes, long spears. Spears typically like 2, 3 meters long. A little bit taller than most people. Pikes usually start about 4 yards, 4 meters. 5 or longer. And the idea was just basically you get a bunch of peasants with a bunch of pikes and you just start marching towards the other side. Again, known as far back at least to the ancient Greeks. They were making a revival with like groups like the Lanzknechts. I hope I pronounced that right. In Europe. So again, pikes, just walking towards the enemy with the pikes. And there's a few other things like they would like, all together they would raise them up and bash them down on the other side. Again, you could really get, the common people involved in warfare once again. So this led to a huge expansion of the military and really set things up for warfare. And this is about the time, that, the historical person that Blackthorn is based on sailed in. Okay. And one of the things again, I'm going off the original TV series and the book. There might be changes in this, but in the series that I saw, they were big, oh, he brought guns. That's why he's so dangerous. No, the Japanese already had guns, and good guns too. They were improving on what the Europeans brought. The big thing that the guy that eventually that Blackthorn is based on, his name was Will Adams. And he was like the first non-Japanese samurai. And that was just, he wasn't a warrior. He was just given samurai status. I know some people are going to say, what about Yasuke? No, Yasuke was a sword bearer for Oda Nobunaga, who was, at the time that they met him, was not going into the battlefield. He was more like the Eisenhower, sending other generals out. There's no reference of him ever being a samurai, just a kosho, a sword page, which was a job normally given to kids. So Will Adams seems to be the first non-Japanese samurai. Might be wrong on that. There might be like a Chinese or something like that before that. But again, he wasn't a warrior and he wasn't mistreated. He was welcomed, opened up. The Japanese really liked talking to him and the Dutch that he came with because the Spanish and the Portuguese had been there, and of course they were not telling everything to the Japanese. This was the real danger of the Blackthorn character. They came in and said, well, we want to do some trade, and it wasn't exactly fair trading. The Japanese were awed by just the military might, and really didn't want to say no. And of course, when they started converting people to Catholicism, they had to basically go along with that. Will Adams, Blackthorn, basically came along and said, well, yeah, that's a very impressive ship, but they can't send any more, or not many more. They can't send enough, definitely cannot send enough to conquer Japan. The reason is that we're having a war with them back in Europe. And if they send enough ships to basically conquer you guys, we're going to beat the pants off of them back in Europe. So they can't, they can't send enough people to conquer you. And the Japanese are like, oh, really? Oh, how fascinating. So we can basically tell them to leave. And eventually that is what happened. Another thing that Will Adams Blackthorn was telling them was, all these guys being converted to Catholicism, their first loyalty is not to anyone in Japan, it's to the Pope. If the Pope tells them to overthrow you guys, well, you're gone. And the Japanese are going, oh dear. So there's a, basically the Japanese then started prosecuting, eventually ended up prosecuting Christianity, or more specifically Catholicism. When Japan was closed off to the rest of the world, they did allow the Dutch and the English, who were Protestants and did not have a pope, to trade, but not any Catholic countries. The English left, and then tried to come back, later on, but their king was a Catholic at that time, and the Japanese said, no, you can't come back. So it was the Dutch, which has always been a Protestant nation. So I assume so. Anyways, so again, that's eventually what happened. In the 1600s, Japan was closed off. But when Blackthorn came along, there was before that there was a guy named Oda Nobunaga. I talked about him. He started reuniting Japan, by conquering it. Then when he got killed by a general, two of his generals were just about ready to go at it: Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Tokugawa Ieyasu, originally named Matsudaira. Talked about that. And eventually Tokugawa bent the knee to Toyotomi. Um, kind of, Toyotomi basically said, hey, I want you way in the north, away from Kyoto, up in this place called Edo. That's modern day Tokyo. Hideyoshi then went on and launched two unsuccessful invasions of Korea to try to conquer China of all things. Well, Tokugawa kind of husbanded his resources, didn't participate in all that much, just a token effort. Um, and yeah, and the thing is that Toyotomi was of peasant stock. He was basically born a peasant, not of the Minamoto clan, so he became imperial regent. Okay, so and basically he ruled Japan that way. When he died, he left an infant child behind, and so there was like a council that took care of things. One of them was Tokugawa Ieyasu. And Tokugawa was part of the Minamoto clan. Again, not named Minamoto, but his name was, but he was part of that. He could trace himself back to the Minamoto, so he could be shogun. So that's what's going on here in the movie Shogun. Is that Toyotomi left an infant child. I can't remember what they call him in the movie, and Tokugawa basically wanted to again become shogun. And eventually it all came to a head in 1600 in the 10th month, you know, uh, lunar calendar, uh, and eventually the forces of, Toyotomi were defeated. Did not mean the end of the Toyotomi clan. They actually held on. They were in Osaka Castle until about 1614 when they raised the flag of war. Tokugawa had already been named shogun in 1603. There's two sieges. They went on. There was a peace. Tokugawa really wasn't eager to play by the rules. So in 1615, again, another siege, and this time the Toyotomi clan was wiped out. Everyone was killed. And that was called the Pax Tokugawa. Almost 250 years of peace, except for some peasant revolts and a little thing with invading Okinawa. But this is what happened. So the background of Shogun is loosely based on these events. Um, when you come into Shogun, you're basically dealing with about the time that Toyotomi has died, and Will Adams shows up and becomes one of Tokugawa's samurai advisor. Again, want to emphasize in real life, the real Will Adams, on which Blackthorn is loosely based on, was not mistreated. He was welcomed. He was made samurai, but he was not a warrior. He never actually fired a gun, as far as I can tell. He was treated well. He was made samurai because of the status, and it was a little bit more boring than the series, which again, is fiction, so they have to add things on. But again, those little additions and things like that are the reasons why I'm like, yeah, no, I think I'm not going to watch this one. But again, if you're not as obsessed with history as I am, and you just want a good story, I mean, the guy that they've got playing what's his name, the future Tokugawa, is just a fantastic actor. And again, if you want to enjoy it, enjoy it. But now you understand that again, the reason why Toyotomi could not be shogun was that he was not part of the Minamoto clan, but Tokugawa could be, and that really was everyone could see things coming, and it was really bad scene. And so all these intrigues during Shogun is actually kind of based on things that were going on. Everyone was like feeling everyone out and making little moves that really were on the radar. So yeah, it's interesting to watch, and I hope people enjoy it, and I hope you get something out of it.